Hey, welcome to Thoughts on Talks.
This is my
Reverend,
soft focus look.
Reverend Mike shining the light, and me, Malayna Dawn, welcome you to listen to Thoughts on Sunday Talks, Reverend Mike's Sunday Talks in this case. And yesterday was June 27th? No, 28th. Yes. And it's the completion of the Mindfulness for Mavericks theme for June. And we started with Just Breathe, then Right Intentions, Right Speech, and this is Right Action. Is that right?
Yep.
Very good. So, and like you mentioned, it has all been very timely, even though these themes were created and the topics were created last year by a team of ministerial students, right? So,
no, ministers.
Ministers, okay.
Yeah.
So still, they were created long before we knew what was going to be happening in the world.
Right.
And it coincides perfectly, which tends to happen with people who align themselves with spirit, at least every now and then. When you have a team of people working that way, it probably happens a lot more often. So right action fits right in with stepping into protests and stepping maybe beyond protests and whatever is next. What is the action we need to take to build our world when we're in this unknown space?
Yeah, man, this is like 3 months now.
March, so mid-March to April to May to June, yeah.
Wow.
It feels longer. I've been saying 4 months because that's what it feels like, but I guess we're going into the 4th month.
I miss the folks.
Yeah. It's challenging too because I'm trying to come up with new ways of connecting with people.
Yeah.
And my mindset is still on the ways that we've always done things. So as we've talked about, my grandmother's hands, maybe getting a group of people to read the book together and go through the experiential part together.
Yes.
But I keep picturing it as people gathering at the center in the sanctuary or in Sparks Hall. And I'm not sure how feasible that is. So then I have to keep like, no, we have to come up with different ways to do it. So then I imagine a park, or then that doesn't feel like a safe space to do, kind of experiential things dealing with trauma, to bring up feelings. I feel like it needs to be a little more.
Well, if we did it in a park and everybody had a can, we get a string, and then we could do.
We may have to learn sign language simultaneously so that we can talk to each other while wearing glasses at a distance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine really anything because we don't know. I was telling you off camera, I'm working with a group to put a conference together that's supposed to happen in October. And it's so difficult to figure out what are we going to be looking at in October. It's just a few months away and everything changes from week to week. It's so hard to know.
Well, I'd be willing to put money on the fact that we're not going to be meeting in groups of more than 100.
Yeah, I can.
It makes planning a conference difficult.
Yeah, I mean, even a small conference, we probably had 70 last year, and I wouldn't imagine so many people being willing to travel this year. So I was aiming for even 30 to 50, which when I told one of the people who had offered to host, he said, "You think that many people are going to want to travel in October?" He was surprised. He thought I was being very ambitious.
Yeah.
So
but the other part of that, to your point, I think people will be ready. So I would not be surprised to see a clamoring for people wanting to come back to church once we open back up, but we're only going to be able to have 20 or 30 at a time.
Yeah.
And they can't touch each other, and we got to take their temperature and squirt their hands and make sure they have a mask, and you know, and you can't linger. You know?
Well, lingering's part of the fun, though.
I know. I know. Although I have been thinking about maybe we could set up tables outside, out in front, and but I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. So we're talking about right action, and the only way we could figure out the right action is to keep checking in with our centers, our spirit, our inner guidance, and one step at a time. I think there's a Martin Luther King Jr. quote where you don't have to see the whole staircase, just one step at a time. And that's kind of where it feels like it is. So we just do our best next step, even though we can't really tell where it might be going.
Yes, and I was listening to the governor today, and of course, the positive cases are still rising, and the people who are getting sick, that percentage is also rising. So even though it's small, right? Even though it's a small group of people per 1,000, just things can get so out of hand so quickly and so easily.
Yeah.
Right now, they're suspecting that the reason why the numbers are jumping in the Sacramento County area is because of family gatherings.
And those are difficult because, especially with family and people that want to gather, they usually want to gather and hug each other and share food and celebrations and hand off each other's babies and stuff like that.
Right, and so they've traced them back to family gatherings in that county. So
yeah,
I don't know, man. It's anyway, it is what it is.
Might be a great time for the introverts who prefer not to be in large crowds, who prefer, because I'm finding I have a bit of an introverted side, so I'm finding I'm pretty comfortable with Zoom calls, and I've just done my first foray out to do something social and saw one of my best friends for the first time in 3.5 months. And I think it's because I know her so well and know her family so well that I didn't feel the need to hug them. Like, it wasn't difficult because it's like, oh, I saw you and hugged you a minute ago, and I'll see you later and hug you later. It was like, it just felt so familiar. But it would also be, I found it okay, but it was my first step out too. So I was,
well, it's just it's kind of for right now, it's the new normal.
Yeah.
And, a year from now, hopefully we'll be looking at this in the rear view mirror. And,
yes. And telling tales to the young ones.
Tales of recovery.
Yeah. Of what the world was like when they don't remember. Yeah. It's pretty weird. So you had a lot of great quotes, though, from people who shared those quotes a long time ago and didn't know that it would be so applicable to all kinds of things. I looked up the Alexander Pope quote that you shared at the end. I don't know if it's a spoiler alert to hop right to the end.
No, I kind of jammed that in there because my intention was to pull out a chunk of it, but
then you got into it and you're like,
well, that's just a piece of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I Googled it
because
I didn't hear if you had said who it was.
I didn't.
So I'm the type of person that Googles that. So I took a little snippet from what you said and just did a search on my phone.
Right.
And found it. So now I know it's Alexander Pope.
Well, and so Alexander Pope is famous for many things, among them being one of the clues in the Da Vinci Code.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but I loved that little poem that he wrote as he's observing the way humans think.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I think I can bring it up and show only that portion. Let's see.
and the inherent brilliance and the inherent folly, at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know that it makes that great a visual, but, and it's one of those because the language, I'll show it anyway because I mentioned I would, and I can. Okay, maybe I should make it a full screen. There we go. So I typed Alexander Pope in. Now let's play Rearrangey on the screeny. There we go. Can you hear the phone ringing in the background?
No.
It's a little song. That's good. So was this the whole chunk that you had planned to share, or was there a part like in the middle?
I thought I was going to be able to cut it off in the first few stanzas, but I wasn't able to. So I couldn't figure out on the fly where to stop.
Right. It is challenging. The proper study of mankind is man. So the poem is called Know Thyself.
Yeah.
Know then thyself, presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is man. Placed on this isthmus of a middle state, a being darkly wise and rudely great. That's a great line.
With too much knowledge for the skeptic side, with too much weakness for the stoic's pride. He hangs between, in doubt, to act or rest, in doubt to deem himself a god or beast, in doubt his mind or body to prefer, but born to die, and reasoning but to err. I could have stopped there, I suppose.
But that's kind of a downer.
I know.
So you kept going. Alike in ignorance, his reason such, whether he thinks too little or too much. Chaos of thought and passion, all confused, still by himself, abused or disabused. Created half to rise and half to fall. Great Lord of all things, yet prey to all. I don't think you made it this far. Sole judge of truth in endless error. Hurl. That's all.
Hurl. Yeah, well, I think the reason why I liked it was this idea of mindful action, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get frozen in inaction because we're afraid, we're just afraid. We're going to screw it up. We're afraid we might be ridiculed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that. Even this past week, I had some work opportunities come up, and it was different work than I've done before, and the person who offered it was moving forward quickly, and I just had this few hours of panic, like, oh my gosh, this is happening so fast, and I've never done this before, and I'm not sure I can, and what is expected of me? And I had to talk myself down and say just one step at a time, and it's okay to be afraid. It's the unknown, but it's an opportunity and it's different, and see where it goes.
Well, and you know, your buddy Sky Isaac,
Yes.
the musician, writer,
Yeah.
physicist.
Guy who came and sang for the first episode of Flourish.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we talk about divine flow and divine right action and so forth, and engaging with that. But you know, that book that he wrote is an exploration in the flow of intelligence.
Yeah.
And how we can access that, particularly in situations precisely like the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
And because there is and this is the reason why I like religious science or New Thought, because when we first considered, when they were first talking about this idea that there's one mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? I just thought, well, that's crazy. My mind is my mind, and we're separate, right? So your mind is your mind, and my mind is my mind. If it was all one mind, why wouldn't, you know? Then I should be Einstein, right?
Point. Yeah.
If I can access the mind of God, then you know, what am I doing swinging a hammer,
Right.
right? And so I got to, and Holmes kind of addresses it, not kind of, he does address that when he speaks to a trained mind being more powerful than an untrained mind. So Einstein was able to access his insight to relativity because he had a mind that was trained in higher mathematics, that allowed him to, that was trained to think in abstractions.
Yeah.
And in such a way that people thought he was wrong. And in fact, for many years, he thought he was wrong on a couple of key points within relativity. But it turned out that his insights led to discoveries.
Yeah.
To me, there's a lot to be hopeful about in that observation.
Yeah.
Because we do have some very dire things ahead of us. Like, you know, we really do need to sort out this riddle of white body supremacy.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And we need to find the language. We being, you know, you and I as, you know, white people, or people of light skin, and I'm going to be speaking to this on Sunday.
Okay.
Because it's so Resmaa speaks of this in his book.
Mm-hmm.
I also stumbled upon something else in my reading about the Victorian age and the emergence of the British Empire. And if we really want to see this idea of white supremacy, another place to look is India.
Yeah.
And so this white supremacy is really has its roots in British imperialism, which carried over, of course, into the United States. And as much as the British would love to wash their hands of the slave trade, the fact is that they were the perpetrators on the North American continent in the beginning. And,
and all of the colonizing powers. So, for example, in Sri Lanka, the Portuguese were there first, I believe, then the Dutch, then the English. And so European colonization and the oppression that came with it was gradual over time. The English were just maybe the most recent and also maybe the most divisive, because they did have a divide and conquer approach.
No, they had divide and rule.
Yes. Yes.
It's a little different.
Yeah. So and living there, I could see that the ideas that came from being oppressed for generations continue on in the modern society. And so it is easy to see that those mindsets are, as we talked about, ancestral. They're handed down,
Right.
inherit them. And I have my
Well,
grandmother.
this goes back to what Resmaa was saying as far as uh, those of us, again, of the European races
Mm-hmm.
or the European bodies. Because I love the way that he speaks to, we really are only one race,
Yeah.
but we do have different bodies.
Yes.
And that our bodies carry within them trauma that is encoded, and it's encoded within us through our DNA,
Mm-hmm.
through natural selection, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you think about it, it's unnatural selection because it's the result of, centuries and centuries and centuries of wars on the European continent where people were fleeing.
Yeah.
They were fleeing all of that jive and the carnage and the um, violence,
Yes.
right?
Well, and watching historical fiction, the ones that are accurate try to give a sense of how violent life was for pretty much everybody everywhere throughout history, and that we have been very fortunate, I guess. Maybe it's just part of privilege to not experience that level of just like daily violence or threat. Um, but it's also just made subtle. It's not overt anymore, but it's still there. And I think that's what's bubbling up now, is for everybody to see that it's still there.
Well, except that we do have people who did experience that.
Yeah.
So the enslaved Africans, certainly, and their generations, their descendants,
Mm-hmm.
but also in the indigenous peoples who were here, who managed to not be killed off.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not that, I don't think it's helpful to try to affix blame to anything per se, except
It's hard to understand how it happened so that we can know what to address.
right. So this goes to Resma's point and the many exercises that he has in his book. So for instance, when someone wants to when people of color want to talk to us about white frailty or privilege, or even white supremacy, right? Well, the trigger is, oh, I can't be that, right? I'm not that,
Right.
right? Which is probably actually more a reaction of, I don't want to be that.
Right.
That's them.
Yeah.
That's not me.
The interesting thing is, isn't that the same reaction when someone is accused of a crime they didn't commit? So, and that's what's happening to Black people all the time.
Right.
So, but then I think the response then for a Black person who is trying to have a conversation with a white person is that they end up having to comfort the white people so that they can get the message through.
Right. Well, our ministers got schooled on that one a few weeks ago on the listserv.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And so it was, so here we have, even within the ministerial community,
Mm-hmm.
where we know better, we still say stupid things. or we say things that are not meant to be offensive, for which people take offense anyway. So it's, and then they get called out. You know, this one buddy of mine, I love him because he, you know, he's, you know, a white middle-aged guy on the upper end of middle age, and he's just putting things out there and taking the licks for the rest of us.
Wow.
And, but it really has been helpful to just
watch the discussions happen, and
to watch the discussions, and then watch him man up, go ahead and take it on the chin, and to say I'm sorry, and then to watch the other person who was offended to accept the apology, right?
Yeah.
I suspect there was probably a phone call or two. But, you know, this is within the ministerial circles.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, we've been talking about diversity and inclusion really ad nauseum, right? But the thing is that, you know, because I'm like, oh gosh, are we just going to keep talking about it? Because this whole social justice thing has been going on for years. Because before we started talking about race concerns, we as an organization, the greater conversations were kind of consumed with marriage equality and gay rights.
Right.
So, you know, we've been speaking to this stuff, and, you know, there's a part of me like, well, can't we just go back to the happy prosperity talk about how to generate more income and more increase in our life? And the answer is, but see, it doesn't have to be either or.
Right. It's all the same principle that we apply.
Yes, and then of course underneath all of that is the awareness for someone like myself that for me it's an option.
Yeah.
To decide whether I want to deal with it or not deal with it. And yet I know that if I was a black man, you know, it's just always there. And again, Resmaa does a nice job of trying to share what that's like, although I think W.E.B. Du Bois in his double consciousness concept that he developed in the early 20th century, right? So it's always there in the back of our minds, you know?
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine what it's like to live with that. And then, you know, I just think of all the, you know, African-American people who I know and love and who I came up with, and folks in our congregation, and, you know, including our assistant minister and, you know, Salon, and, you know, the different families that we have, and then just the guys that I came up with, you know, grew up with. So whenever this stuff has come up, and I think this is part of that, it actually does tie into mindful action, because part of it is, you know, if it's not a mindful action, sometimes it's an unconscious reaction.
Yes.
Right? So, and I have, you know, I don't know if I've talked to you about this before, maybe I have, but it's been significant. When I was visiting my mom, I asked her about it again. Because I had a situation, like when I was like eight or nine, my hero, we lived in these courts in the Air Force out of Dayton, Ohio. And I lived on Cobb Drive, and it was the enlisted area. And my hero was Bobby Mack. Bobby Mack was, African American, and they went to public school. We went to Catholic school, but every day in the summer we were playing baseball, right? So this is like that age when and not just boys either. I mean, in my day, girls played baseball too until they got to be a certain age, I suppose. But at any rate, so Bobby was, he was the stud in the court. And I just really looked up to him, and we were good friends. And we were going somewhere. All these courts had a back to them and a long sidewalk that kind of tied the whole back housing area together. And some toughs showed up and started, picking on him and calling him names, and
So you were about 8 years old at this?
8 or 9. I might have been 10.
How old were the bullies?
I don't know, because my mom tells me the story, right? So they took me because I stood up to him.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby took off to get my mom, and they got a hold of me and took my clothes off and threw me in the bushes.
Mm-hmm.
So when my mom showed up, right, I'm like hiding in the bushes and crying because I'm all embarrassed, and I'm down to my skivvies, right?
Mm.
But I don't remember it.
Right. But something in your
it.
body, it's stored in there somewhere.
Right, because, and as I'm reading this book, because I'm like, well, gee, why, I mean, I had friends and stuff, but I always have had this, the unjustness of it all. And I don't know if it's because I was raised that way, or maybe this incident encoded it into my subconscious, because I really don't, I sort of remember it, but I don't really remember it.
Yeah.
And but I think about things like that and other instances where I have had the opportunity to speak up,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I have to say, I was a lot braver when I was a kid.
Well,
There were other times when I had opportunities to speak up as an adult and didn't. And it just kind of went along with the
status quo.
well, no, it wasn't. Anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is that there's room for improvement for all of us.
Yeah.
And
I think the people who find it difficult, as we've talked about before, are people who are raised and taught to think that way, to see that way, to see others that way, to see the hierarchy of like, this type is better than this type. And it happens, humans are wired like this. It's how tribes survived. So even in countries where everybody's the same color of skin, they find reasons to look for differences and divide. It's a human thing.
Right.
The part that we're facing now is that it's gotten to such a place where we are pretending that we're a society that is equal and just and fair and has freedom, and yet people are dying for no reason, and it's from the people who are supposed to be protecting us. So that is the like horrifying thing that we're looking at.
Yeah.
The Elijah McClain story. Are you familiar with that? That's been coming up a lot in my social media feeds. He was a young man on the autism spectrum, young Black man. He played violin. He taught himself. And he used to play violin for stray cats so that to calm them and soothe them. And this is the type of person he was. He was seen walking home from a convenience store. Police stopped him, said he was acting strangely. He's on the spectrum. They told him to stop, and he said, I have a right to go back to my house. And I think because they didn't get the reaction that they wanted from him, they kept on and kept on, and eventually did the kind of holds. In the story I read, it was described as like a pressure on a certain vein or something. I can't remember the name of it, but he passed out 2 or 3 times. They eventually cuffed him. There were 3 cops, and he ended up with an injury that took his life he ended up at the hospital, but he died within a few days. And he actually hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't even suspiciously stolen anything. He was walking suspiciously home. He was listening to music, so he didn't respond initially because of that. And he, I guess, could be seen as talking back or resisting, because he said, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm an introvert. Please respect my boundaries. Please leave me alone. He was communicating clearly and still ended up dying. And that's horrifying, that anybody would be that innocently walking around doing nothing but just walking. And that's, you hear of African American parents having to have that talk with their children, saying, because you're Black, you have to be extra careful of these things, and teaching them how to act when they're pulled over. And to know that now, as it's becoming so clear for everybody, that our friends who have been walking alongside us, where we've heard it occasionally and thought, oh my gosh, that's terrible that you have to deal with that. And it's just a momentary blip in our consciousness. And yet they continue to have to deal with it. And it's just getting worse and worse, is why we all have to step in now, because the thought that our friends could die, that our loved ones, that our family members, that our community members could die. I mean, we all need to feel the import of that.
Right. Well, and so we have this this opportunity with everything that's going on, and then we have this bloody virus underneath everything. And really, I think the big question is, what is the mindful action that we're going to take that will actually, because we've been living so much from outrage for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And from both sides of the political spectrum, which has been amplified by social media and by opposing news organizations with their own biases.
Yeah.
And then this crazy thing of this commitment by the idea in journalism that you present both sides of a story, right? Well, I think, and that's admirable, and it needs to happen, but both sides of the story also need to be fact checked.
Right.
That is, the diligence has not been there for that. I don't know why, and I don't know what the answer is. But
well, I think also that
mindful action.
Right.
Right. So one of the actions that each one of us can take is to make sure the crap that we're reposting is at least true. And if it's not helpful, don't post the damn thing.
Yeah. Right? So we have to take that journalistic integrity, that ideal of journalistic integrity, which may or may not be shown by the journalists right now. Not all of them, just some of them. And do the fact checking ourselves and be our own little news agency when we share things on social media.
I've gotten caught by it too. There was a story that was being spun around about a Nighthawk that was shot down in Afghanistan that had like, I don't know, 12 or 13 troops, American soldiers, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing was, you know, how come this isn't making the news? Right? Well, the reason why it's not making the news is because it's like 3 years old.
Right. Yeah.
But without fact checking, I too sent it on, and then one of my friends said, "Yeah, Mike, this happened like in 2013 or whatever it was."
Yeah, a lot of people are posting about Confederate statues being taken down, but that also happened 3 years ago for a lot of the articles that are being reshared now. So in the context of today, when you see that posted, you think it's a reaction to the protests that are happening today, but it's not. It happened years ago.
I always thought that was just stupid. I never understood why we had statues to losers up all over the South. They lost.
That's the power of loyalty to a cause, or, you know, dedication to a belief system. It's powerful.
Even when I was a kid, you know, because I'd have these guys who'd show up, you know, and they'd have their little Confederate flag, and
I was
just confused. Dude, you know, that's like 100 years ago. You got the wrong flag.
Right.
Right? It's like, you know, I don't know I don't think there's any statues to George Washington in London. Right? That would be something interesting to find out. Maybe in France, since they were our first ally, you know, certainly Benjamin Franklin's probably got it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The idiotic, it's just, the whole notion is idiotic. And you know, and just this, and then there's just this idiotic notion of the noblesse of war anyway. Like the charge of the Light Brigade on road to 600, to their death. You know, the Tennyson poem, like there's gallantry and blah, blah, blah.
Well,
you know, come on, man.
If you think about the history of storytelling and the power of storytelling. So this kind of goes back to last week's talk, which was right speech, but that the way stories were conveyed were through these songs, and through, you know, minstrels would go from town to town. Like, this is a long time ago, like medieval times, but those things.
I saw Life of Brian.
Sure, that's a historical document.
No, I mean, In Search of the Holy Grail. Yeah.
There you go. Right. So this is how humans actually internalize stories, is with song and with poetry and with storytelling and with you know, statues, things to remember history. And you know, we could put up a statue ourselves if we wanted to. If you know, like in LA, you probably need to get a permit and stuff, but still, there are steps we could take. We could take a statue of anybody and put it up, and it doesn't mean that they're being honored by the entire country because that statue is up. That meant that they got the permits and they had the money and they put it up, and it's a long-lasting thing, a tribute to whatever. And then you have to deal with the fallout of the people who aren't going to like the statue or all of that. I saw an article about people defacing Winston Churchill's statues in London as part of the Black Lives Matter protests. And the conversation I saw between friends who have lived in different places all over the world were that there was a historical importance to Winston Churchill. I mean, he did a lot of good. Just because he wasn't 100% wonderful human, I think that's part of what we have to awaken to, is that our leaders should be good leaders. It doesn't mean they're going to be faultless people. And so the suggestion that I've seen over and over again is, if we're going to take statues down, let's put them in a museum where we can put them in context. Like, this statue was at this period of time for this purpose, and this is why it's not out there anymore, or something like that.
All right, so we'll put them in the Holocaust Museum.
Exactly.
You know,
Or something like that.
I am not down with saying, oh, let's have the museum for the, you know,
right,
the
not
fallen comrades of the Confederacy. Yeah, no. They lost the war. It was 100 years ago. It's time to get over it. Join the union. Let's work
but
at
that too. I mean, history is
work at creating a more perfect union.
right.
You bring your concerns and your cares to the table, and you know, and get over that. Just get over your white resentment, man.
History is the story told by the victors, right? The winners. So, but it's not that the people who didn't win don't hold on to some story. I mean, if you look at Germany between World War I and World War II, they were a beaten people who was trying to build up their self-esteem again, and kind of took it to an extreme, let's say, under their very extreme leader. And so in that case, that's the story of a losing side that went very extreme. And of course, you always say, why does everybody go straight to Hitler for all the arguments? And I was trying not to say it, but that's where I was going.
Yeah, but you know, that it was the Kaiser's arrogance and hubris that started World War I also.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it didn't start it, but certainly it was part of it, because he had his own plans for ambitious plans. Of course, it was Franz Ferdinand being killed in Serbia and all that.
That was
and
that.
Everybody did the whole, you know, ally
right.
thing, and next thing you know, insanity
so really,
breaking out.
Those are symbols, like the Confederate statues are symbols of an ideology, and taking them down does not erase the ideology. It might help for future generations to not, you know, have those people who were trying to keep slavery going glorified in the middle of a town that you have to walk by every day. But it's the ideology and changing hearts and minds of the people alive today. We're not going to be able to erase history, and we shouldn't, because we need to know that we as humans have made all of these mistakes and all of these progress, and they're correlated, that we learn from this mistake. One of the things, a great analogy that keeps coming to my head is, I was married to an airline pilot, and so one of his favorite things was to watch a National Geographic show about flight disasters, and what were the things that happened, what were the things that had to go wrong, and it's always a series of things that has to go wrong before the plane crashes. And that was what I got from that, was that it's not just one thing.
Right, it's a cascade of events.
Yeah, it's like all of these fail-safes have to go wrong and line up for this bad thing to happen. But what the airline industry does after that is put in another fail-safe. And so that's why we now have the lights along the pathway in the middle of the plane so that you can find your way to the door. Those didn't used to be there until a disaster happened. That's why they have, you know, all these different protocols. And so we have to look at the whole picture of what was tried, what failed, what we learned. And otherwise, if we erase stuff, we're just doomed to repeat it and try to learn again, right? How to teach that and how to communicate that is our challenge now. I don't have any answers.
I don't know.
I'm just looking at where to even start. It's a huge...
Well, we don't have any statues up for the guy who discovered COBOL.
No.
That revolutionized the way business is done. So I don't understand why we've got some,
Yeah.
statues up to rednecks who, I mean, yeah, they were generals, great.
Right.
But,
It is.
a lot of them went to West Point too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing is it's just absurd. It's time we just need to get over it. It might take get rid of the damn statues. And within a generation, no one will even remember they were there. And I don't think that's such a bad thing.
No. And new statues can come up of, celebrating different things.
Yeah. Like how about the Underground Railroad,
Yeah.
you know? Or,
There are probably statues of Harriet Tubman somewhere.
yeah, I'm sure there are.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm talking out my hat, and I understand that, but I'm just saying, as a kid, I never got it, and
Right.
clearly, I still don't.
No. And I guess our work, our next action is to help find the people who are willing to listen, willing to take steps to change and to be more aware and to connect, to create
Maybe if we kept the statues and just kept defacing them and let them stay in place. Maybe that would be like a cleansing.
Symbolic.
A cleansing of the.
Yeah. But how could it be done that it could be used as a conversation starter of like a place where people who want to protect the monuments and people who have reason to take them down can focus all their conversation on one.
So, in Portland, there's a beautiful golden statue to Joan of Arc. It's it's over on the east side near Laurelhurst.
Okay.
Laurelhurst, that's an older district. And there's a roundabout that the cars drive around.
Okay.
And she's mounted. Joan, I have no idea what she's doing there. And it's gold.
Wow.
So, I mean, to me, okay, so that's pretty safe.
Yeah, I mean,
Why do you need what's his name, Beauregard, whatever?
I don't know, but I don't have roots in the history of the South really, so that it doesn't trigger any protective mechanism for me. It doesn't trigger any family history. It doesn't, but it's one of those flashpoint things, but really it's just a symbol. Statues are just symbolic, and we're adjusting our connection to symbols in our society right now. And the white body, black body, blue body analogy and languaging that Resmaa Menakem talks about in his book brings to mind, if those are just the bodies, then that implies that we're talking to each other's souls, right? It's a soul to soul connection that we have to heal.
Yeah.
The trauma is that we've been somehow taught to believe that we're separate, when really, if you look into the eyes of a person of any color and you can make that connection through the eyes, the windows to the soul, you see that it's another, spirit in there. It's a reflection. And I don't know how anybody could have been so cut off to not be moved by that. And it's sad because that means that person must have had so much trauma. One of the stories I posted to Facebook, which you might have seen, it's another statue, is a statue to like the guy who's considered the father of gynecology, and that he supposedly he bought slave women to experiment on.
Yes, I saw
that. Anesthetic. So before I reposted it, I did do some research, and I found a peer-reviewed article about taking a fresh look at medical ethics in that situation, and that you can do a soundbite saying that he was an evil doctor who purposely put these women through pain. But if you look at the bigger story, he found women who had a specific diagnosis, and he was trying out an operation to help them. Mm-hmm. And that anesthetic was not very, they hadn't had a lot of experience with it then, and it was very dangerous to use.
Yes.
And so that's why he didn't use it. Of course, when he started doing the procedure on white women after he had tested it, he did use anesthetic. But the women who the slaves that he bought were suffering without having the operation, and he eventually was able to help them, I think. I mean, so their names were Lucy, Anarcha, and Betsy. And so I think for now, yes, there are women protesting that the statue be taken down, but maybe we should put our focus somewhere else, on the women whose ultimate sacrifices help to make it possible for women to have surgeries that can save them today. So it's just a shift of focus. Let's try that. All of us.
Yeah. Well, it is, there's enough to work on in the present.
Yes.
But we don't need to relitigate the past, that's for sure.
But the past is what got us to the present.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We have to take it into account, because it's part of the backstory that we're all trying to unravel, and all of our attachments to those backstories, and all of the traumas that we may have forgotten that are connected to reactions that happen today. We all need to tap into that one mind that knows all and knows heart and knows spirit, and that we are all expressing. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to heal this, is to heal that connection within ourselves and between each other, because we're each that one spirit. But remembering that, living it, helping each other remember, that's the work.
Right. And to remember that when you lose, you need to be a good sport about
it. Look at you getting in that last little. No,
I appreciate what you're saying, but
I was going to say, what if we don't call it losing? But I'm not sure how that works if you didn't get your point across to be the point that everybody agrees with. I don't know how else.
Well, like a lot of stuff happened, right? The carpetbaggers came down and took advantage.
Yeah.
Of the whole situation down there, black and poor white.
Yeah.
And
opportunists are everywhere.
But the thing that I guess the reason why I'm just not buying it is because most of these statues went up, in the 1890s, well after the Civil War, during Jim Crow, which to me was even more pernicious than slavery itself, because now you're making everybody practice self-responsibility, but then they're denied equal opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's amazing to me that I heard one woman say, folks are lucky that we're looking for equality and not revenge, as far as just this one black woman in the heat of the moment.
That is very heated. I mean, I had a reaction to the word revenge.
Yeah.
And the part of the problem is that the revenge would be directed toward generations ago, acts that were started generations ago, or revenge on specific individuals.
Well, it was, the conversation was around reparations, actually.
Okay. Right.
So anyway, it's a complex thing, and it's going to have many facets to be addressed.
Yeah.
Again, we have to take responsibility for our own triggers and our own reactions as we work through the conversation, because
Yeah.
And this is going to take years to get sorted out.
Right.
So when you look at Japanese reparations for the internment, that was 50 years.
Yeah.
This cannot wait that long. This needs to be done much quicker than that.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me the first order of business is just to address the culture of brutality and militarization within our police departments, but that's just the surface stuff.
Right.
We as a people, each one of us, just as citizens, go within and do our own work.
Yeah.
And then in creating this consciousness of healing within ourselves and within our families and within our communities, then it will naturally outpicture in these other areas too, to where the culture of policing itself. So one of the things that I found interesting this week in my digging around was that you would think that having more people of color in the police force would change everything up, but the culture is still the same. So black police officers feel like they can't speak up because then they'll be found to be favoring, the criminal.
Right.
So it's a really weird, complex thing that's going to, I think, just a strand at a time is going to need to be addressed. And for people like ourselves, even though it's a small spiritual community, but it's big enough to where we can make an impact, at least on this little corner of the valley. Because it's not just about Black lives either. It's our Latino brothers and sisters, and because we need to, if we can get the race thing figured out and deal with the immigration thing at that same time and figure out how to get that sorted out, then we might actually be able to hit the real sacrifice that's coming down the pike, which our children are going to have to deal with, and that is climate change.
Right.
Because we need, as a human family, we need a total 180 reboot if we are to survive, because we are on the brink of mass extinction if we don't.
Yeah.
So how do we bring this teaching, right, and seeing, not only seeing the positive, but it's more than that, right?
Yeah.
It's about healing. It's about healing the shadow aspects of our consciousness so that the brightest side of our inherent being then comes forth. Courage, truth, goodness, beauty, that these then are able to come forth authentically and not just glazing, glazing over the rotten apple. Caught myself.
Yes, you did. Good job.
But so much of spiritual practice, it's too easy to do that.
To gloss
right?
over, yeah.
To just smear some positive thinking on it, right?
Yeah. So
because
that's
we
what
don't want to look at, right? So I mean, the conservatives not wanting to look at the fact that there's a corrupt guy who's running the show.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Well, and then
has he done some good things for conservative, blah, blah, blah? Yes.
Okay.
But it doesn't cut the fact. It doesn't change the fact that the way that he's operated in the world is deeply rooted in an unprincipled, egocentric way. And it just has not made for effective leadership at this level. So, and I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're going to have to become willing to look at as people of faith.
Yes.
As either we're going to, because, and not as people of one particular faith system, but to make it as broad and truly ecumenical.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, in fact, I don't even like that faith, that word. I prefer interfaith.
Yeah.
Because so much of the ecumenical talk is just, biding time to wait until everybody wakes up to where Jesus is the Savior, and then we can bring in the golden millennium of when Christ comes down and so forth, which is a lovely story. But there's no responsibility, there's no self-responsibility built into that.
Right.
And, I think we need to build a society and a life that Jesus would want to come visit. How about that idea?
Right. And he might want to, be able to actually stick around.
Yeah.
And
you know what I mean?
Long, yeah.
It's like, we need a gigantic, you never have company over until you've done, that old saying, if you want to get your house clean, invite somebody over.
Yeah.
So you want Jesus to come down and have the second coming, then let's clean this place up and make it a place that, the Almighty would want to come visit.
Let's make it a place that Gandhi would get bored. And he'd just, have plenty to eat, and he'd have lots of loomed clothes because he has nothing better to do. He doesn't have to fight. He's just like, hey, we've all got these natural farms. They're organic. We're making hand loom clothes. We're meditating. We're hanging out. It's all good. All of our martyrs can come back and be like, nah, I got nothing to do. I'm going to chill. Swim in a lake. I like this vision.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I think as humans and in this material realm, there's always going to be challenges and we get bored without them, but there are other things we can focus on. So I don't think we're going to get bored.
So have you found this book, Sapiens?
I'm letting you read it and tell me about it because you bring it up a lot. So I figure I'm getting the good bits.
This guy's young. Because I've been watching him on YouTube.
Okay.
The book's like 4 years old.
Okay.
And he's an Israeli professor.
Cool.
He's young. I do these young guys who are so smart, like Simon Sinek.
Mm-hmm.
You know him?
Mm-hmm.
He's another one of these guys. He's a leadership training guy.
Okay.
He looks like, he's probably 40 now, but I mean, he's been, Wilbur, Ken Wilbur, right? I mean,
right.
20 years ago, 30 years ago, he developed spiral dynamics when he was like, 10.
He wasn't 10.
But, these guys are like super young, and I'm like, influential.
Yeah.
But he's been making this connection. The reason why I'm bringing it up is because of your Flourish show. And he's talking about how climate change and the way that capitalism is currently practiced are at direct odds to each other because, of course, capitalism uses the resources to create product and so on and so forth. So he's been speaking to the challenge,
right?
How to bring the obvious, there's this, well, he likes to talk, and you mentioned this earlier, which made me think about it, is the power of story and the power of, in fact, he's not myth, but story.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about the story of money being one of the most successful stories.
Oh, is that Simon Sinek?
No, this is, what's his name? How do I say his name?
The Sapiens?
Yuval Noah Harari.
Okay.
From Sapiens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's speaking to the idea of the story of money has been the one driver that has lifted many people out of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
That has really been a real driver, that capitalism has been a driver of innovation and technology.
Mm-hmm.
So the next big thing is going to be, how to figure out, as humans now become less involved in work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So because now we're moving we're now in the post-industrial revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So as we are now no longer actually making and fashioning things, and instead moving into a technological era where there's going to be less to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're creating machines and data. So
Right.
the next age is data, and it's really quite. I mean, he's actually saying that everything is now an algorithm. That a human being or anything that we know in this existence
Mm-hmm.
is an algorithm.
So I think of that as like the evolution of consciousness back toward spirit or one mind is that the way that we've created computers and language, and the way that the operating systems are also an interpretation of how we are in connection with one consciousness. And so everything is consciousness. So in computer language, everything's an algorithm, everything is binary, everything is, it's all electric impulses and numbers, which can be, the language of the universe. It's one way of interpreting it and communicating it. But our understanding has gotten to the point where instead of, like you said, fashioning things or getting machines to do it, because that industrial machine era informed the way we as humans thought about the world, that things were parts and components that put together to work, and that you take them apart, that the human body was just, a heart and a brain and some bones. And now we're coming to this whole sort of integrated idea of that there is information behind all of that infuses all of it. So we know that, we can store trauma in the body, that it's not just parts that are disconnected, that our feelings are stored in our muscles and in our DNA and all of that. So it's an evolution of consciousness that we're seeing. And so our right actions, to take it back to our topic, are to assist in that evolution of seeing and sharing this consciousness level of that we are all one. We're all the expression of one being, one consciousness, of one spirit, and to move back toward an expression that maybe feels more worthy of that oneness, of the love at the heart of it.
Right. That's all.
Okay, that's all we have to do.
That's all we have to do. Good news.
That's so easy. Save the planet, save humanity, save, I don't know, everything. That's all.
By saving our little part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By just taking the responsibility to take that right action that each of us needs to as our co-creation of this world.
Well, I'm just doing one simple thing right now. As I'm going around wearing these masks and all that, I am trying to make, with my mask on, trying to make it obvious that I am a friendly and loving guy without being creepy about it.
So do you walk around like doing that, or do you smile and let it be seen in the eyes, or do you talk to people?
I just feel like, you know, since I'm getting older, I just feel like it's important that people see older white guys being friendly and nice and loving and open.
Well, that's nice of you.
I mean, I can
at
least do that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good right action, to just go out and be loving, even at a distance, at a safe physical social distance with a mask on.
Don't share my air, man.
Well, I think we've done all we could do today for Thoughts on Talks.
Yeah.
Quite
my brain hurts from thinking.
So if you didn't see Reverend Mike's Sunday Talk, you can go back to the CSLGH YouTube channel and watch it there. And we had 2 talks. I think we've done just 2 with Salam and Reverend Nancy. This past week, because Reverend Mike was traveling and Salam and I didn't coordinate, Salam and I both watched, are you showing your wingspan?
I'm hiding. I just realized how dirty my desk was.
Oh. We both watched, I shared a Paley, wow, look, you're wearing shorts. Paley Center for Media shared a conversation between journalists of different backgrounds. One of them is an Asian White House correspondent, a woman, and then they had a CNN journalist whose name sounds like he's from a mixed background, and as Salam saw that I was sharing it on Facebook, and so we were both commenting on it. So if you look on my Facebook and you can see the Paley Center for Media conversation with journalists, you can watch that. It was really interesting, talking about how there's no way to tell the story without you yourself being part of the story. And when it comes up against, you know, objective journalism and being part of the story, it was really interesting. So even though we didn't have our own conversation, Salam and I were both participating in a conversation. I think I also put it on my Pop Conscious page on Facebook. And we will be continuing to explore how and when we're going to step into doing something that involves more of these conversations and moving it forward. We haven't quite formulated it yet. We haven't given up on it.
Right.
What's that? Oh, that's the Paley Center, yes. Well done. The impact of.
So on this show is backwards on my screen, but does that show?
I see it regular. I can read it.
Okay.
The impact of journalism. So hopefully the people who are watching this later can see it like I see it.
All right, very good.
Yes, and one of these days I'll do a flourish too. It seems like time is coming. I'm watching a tomato grow, so when it gets to that beautiful stage, that might be the time is ripe. That will be my sign.
To slurp it down.
No, to do a flourish show and celebrate it.
Speaking of tomatoes,
yes.
I just went to TJ's.
Okay. Great. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody. I'm going to stop.
Bye. Have a great week. See you Sunday. Love you. Mean it.